The fifth set will be played on Naro Station. Spawning in the bottom left-hand position as the Red Terran from SK Telecom T1, their last chance for this match. His name is Fantasy.
His opponent spawns in the top right position. His name is Terminator, playing for a Kespa teammate as Blue Protoss. The score right now is 3-1 between the two teams, with Cure, Argo, and Pig Baby winning for Kespa teammate and SK Telecom T1. Only Bisu won the match.
Could be a repeat. The last time Bisu won a match, just everyone else on the team lost, unfortunately, for SK Telecom. So hopefully it doesn't turn into the Bisu curse where he wins, but the rest of his team ends up losing. And Fantasy could either contribute or break the curse before it even has a chance to set off here. Terminator, though, after seeing Pig Baby come up with a really cool cheese against Rain, I could see him pulling off the stops, doing something to really catch Fantasy off guard. I would say that Fantasy is maybe a little bit weaker in this matchup than the other ones. It's something that, maybe has a bit of a trouble with, but still, overall pretty solid, just like not always the top dog when it comes to TvP.
Yeah, so it really depends on how Terminator plays against his opponent Fantasy. Fantasy most likely is going to go for the harassment-oriented play. This guy is not a macro monster, but when it comes to the multitasking, when it comes to the multiple attacks and harassment, he is fantastic. That's the reason why Terminator just needs to defend against his opponent Fantasy, and once he finds a gap against his opponent's play, that's when he should go for the attack and win the game.
Fantasy deciding to opening this up with a 14cc on the low ground as well, so showing that he is not afraid of any potential pressure the Terminator could do early on in the game. Terminator is grabbing the double gases here. This is going to put 2 probes on each gas for now. And we do see a barracks follow-up, of course, from Fantasy. You kind of have to get the barracks if you want to progress in your tech tree. And I would imagine if he's going to go ahead and put the command center on the low ground, he'll probably go for the double racks play.
Double racks play is the standard after going for the CC first on low ground. You just need those many units out to defend against what the Protoss opponent might have. There we go, second barracks being built from Fantasy.
Indeed, so all according to plan on Fantasy's end here. We do have a Zealot on the way for Terminator here. He could potentially cancel out if he wants to, and just have that in case his opponent wants to do the engineering bay block that we do see Terran players do from time to time at the Protoss's naturals.
It's really interesting because Terminator right now has 3 probes on each geyser, and he was banking up on a lot of gas. He is getting a mothership core as soon as the 7S core finished, but it's really interesting to see if he wants to take an expansion soon, or is he going to go for some type of tech play such as Stargate.
Yeah, and he has saved up a lot of gas, so most likely it is going to be that tech play there. He's got a lot there, and ooh, all right, well, not committing to anything just yet here. He's got a lot of gas in the bank. You can tell how bad Terminator wants to hide his tech from his opponent Fantasy here, but all right, there goes the Stargate up right now. It looks like the SCV will just barely miss it, and also notices that there's no expansion up just yet as well. Fantasy knows there's a pylon up in that position, so he's probably expecting something kind of a little weird from Terminator.
If Fantasy was counting the number of gas inside the assimilator, he should know that his opponent was mining from those gases for a long time, and 3 probes were mining from each gas, which refers to a tech play from his opponent. So Fantasy, he should know what is up from his opponent, immediately throws up the 3rd barracks, but also constantly making Marines from his 2 initial barracks.
Indeed he is. Alright, Stargate about to finish here. Let's see what Terminator wants to open up with. Could be an Oracle, and instead a Phoenix from Terminator.
This is interesting because we're seeing some Protoss players trying to use Stargate to defend against the early drop play from their opponent. And I see why Terminator decided to do this, because Fantasy loves to go for the early harassment, gets the medevacs out, gets the helmets out to roast the probes, and he wanted to counter those medevacs using his own Phoenixes.
I think that Fantasy is actually expecting there to be some type of proxy outside of the base of Terminator here, but unbeknownst to him, the tech is all in Terminator's main base here, and he's going to be chronoing out these Phoenixes, getting the Robo behind it, so it's a macro build, but with a Phoenix opening.
And with Fantasy not going for the harass-oriented play, rather he's just going for the pure bio, these Phoenixes can get a perfect scout inside the main base, but this also means that Terminator's robo is going to get slightly delayed, and his upgrades are going to get delayed as he is dumping the gas into the Stargate tech.
Look at that. Fantasy completely ready for any potential drop or harassment that could come his way here. The SCV actually somehow gets in the main base, scouts the Phoenix as well. We already have 2 turrets on the way from Fantasy as well, in both the main and the natural. Here the Phoenixes going to try to pick off a few units here and there, but I'm not sure if they can actually end up doing too much economic damage here. Fantasy looks like he is prepared to deal with this pressure.
So now it's really important for Terminator to keep those Phoenixes alive and get some scouting information on his opponent, because remember, these Phoenixes did not deal enough damage against the SCVs, and Terminator is behind when it comes to the upgrades. He did not even see an eBay inside the main base, as he needs to buy enough time to get his upgrades out, to get the Robo Bay out, to get the Colossus.
Alright, we do see the Forge on the way here from Terminator. And his upgrades will be a little bit behind Fantasy's, at least temporarily. Fantasy already focusing on his +1 attack. Phoenix is moving in here. They get 1 worker, but that Phoenix does take some damage there. And from Fantasy's side, he's just starting to go into macro mode right now. He's got 2 tech labs so he can research the stim and combat shields, as well as bring out a lot of Marauders to complement his Marine force that he built up earlier on in the game.
Yeah, Terminator right now, he did kill up to 4 SCVs. Nice job with the Phoenixes, but remember, these Phoenixes are applying constant pressure against his opponent Fantasy. As Fantasy, he loves to go for the drops, but because of the Phoenixes, he cannot go for the harassment-oriented play that he loves to do.
Alright, we got Colossus on the way now. The +1 has started being researched as well for Terminator. Fantasy moving across the map here. He's looking for a timing, the stim and combat shields, as well as the +1 attack will complete here shortly, but these Phoenixes are going to confirm that the Marines have indeed moved across the map. This Observer also confirming that Fantasy wants to go for some pressure here as well. Remember, the medevacs are not with the main army yet, and the Phoenix could try to intercept them on their way to that army.
He's doing a nice job picking off these Marines inside the main base, but the problem is Terminator needs to defend at his own natural, and immediately he pulls his units back home after realizing that the Marines are in the middle of the map. Can he pick up the medevacs?
The medevac's going to get picked up potentially. He needs to boost those out of there. What is Fantasy doing? Forgetting about the boost on both of them. There he goes, finally boosting out one of the medevacs, but that's going to get potentially picked off as well. No escapes from out. The other one does get out of there. These units trying to move up here. The force fields are solid here. Don't pick off too many units here. Fantasy, he needs to get out of there. No way he wants to risk more units getting force fielded off there. Excellent defense and overall play from Terminator.
And this gives Terminator enough time to get a second Colossus out, to get those additional gateways, but most importantly, the upgrades that Terminator was lacking in the beginning of the game.
So his +1 attack about to finish now. We have Fantasy working on his +1 armor. His +1 bio ground force attack has completed here. And, you know, we could actually see a bit of a timing from Terminator here. He is free to grab an expansion as well. He's still making probes here. But I do feel like in this position, he's actually looking pretty solid here.
He still needs to play it safe, however, as he only has few sentries and the Zolus, and if he is caught in the middle of the map, Fantasy can split his bio units and start picking off on the Colossus 1 by 1. So Terminator, yes, he could go out and try to get a timing, but before he can get a timing, he needs to get tons of gateway units out in order to do so.
Terminator going to start on his +1 armor now. The extended thermal lance is almost completed. The Observer being completely invisible to Fantasy. The Phoenix now moving in, going to back off once again, and I'm really surprised Fantasy has not killed off that Observer just yet here, and he's moving into a dangerous location on the map.
Now that's up to 3 Colossus. If Terminator catches these units out of position, then he can eat those units alive.
This is looking scary here. Fantasy has to back up now. He needs to make sure his units don't get force fielded off as well. He has some additional reinforcements. Good force fields come. Going to pick off a few more units once again here, and Fantasy is able to pick off almost all of the Phoenixes there, though. Only one remaining. Terminator behind this is going to take a third base and continue the pressure here. The supplies are very neck and neck, but now the Vikings have joined the party here, but is it going to be enough to deal with 3 Colossi?
Yeah, well, that's only 4 Vikings, which means that if Terminator has enough anti-air, he can still press on for the attack, and he's just applying pressure. He's just trying to scare his opponent. If he finds a gap, he's going to go in for the attack, but his main goal right now is to establish the third base without being harassed by Fantasy's multiple medevacs.
Now this position is still very defensible from both angles, from the Terran or Protoss side, but it looks like Terminator wants to move in for the attack here, segmenting off parts of these armies. The Vikings, they need to be in position to deal with the Colossus from the other side of that angle here. He can attack the Colossi from beyond that ridge, and the Stalkers can actually attack the Vikings due to the range, but he is keeping his units just behind the bunkers.
And it all happened because Fantasy was panicking a little bit in that position, which was really scary from Terran players' perspective. If the Protoss players squeezed out a lot of units, Fantasy thought that he could have died, but in fact, his opponent Terminator was trying to fake it out so that he was getting a third base, and the Nexus finishes. Fantasy still does not know about the third base from his opponent.
Yeah, so from both sides, we do have a very kind of low upgrade style game here. You know, they're only at 1-1, both players respectively here, but Fantasy going to go for a big Doom drop at the third expansion here. And where are Terminator's units? They're at the natural there. They need to move over there quickly. Can Fantasy snipe these units or do some damage here? Is going to go for the Nexus with the Colossi. They are moving in here. It looks like Fantasy is indeed going to get those units, the Nexus, and he's going to boost out there, only losing a few Marines to his name. Nice play from Fantasy there, doing what he can to, you know, kind of move forward ahead into this game.
And this all stems from the fact that Terminator lost the 4 Phoenixes that he had earlier in the game. If those 4 Phoenixes are still alive and well, he can deny the Medivac drop easily at the third base, and this Nexus would have been still alive and well.
Oh, it looks like Terminator, he doesn't have the Phoenix, so he's going to go for the Storm now, as that is near completion, as well as the Zealot Charge ability here, and he is starting to focus a little bit more on upgrades. The defensive position here from Terminator is still pretty solid. These drops are not going to really do too much in the natural, I feel. But at the same time, Fantasy moving over towards the third base, this could just simply be a distraction.
Yeah, this is definitely a distraction, and he has all of his army over here. Fantasy just pulls out as he is still sitting in the middle of the map. He did not time this correctly, and Terminator also knows about the army in the middle of the map because that single observer still hasn't been taken out.
Fantasy, okay, there he goes. He does pick off that observer that was watching his army now, but Terminator, he knows what his opponent's up to here, so he should be able to defend against this pressure here. And Fantasy, oh, nice Storms hitting the bulk of those bio units. They're picking off a good amount. These Marauders going to kill a lone High Templar there before escaping. And now Fantasy working on his 2-2, but the upgrades are going to be slightly ahead for Terminator as his +2 armor will complete shortly.
And Terminator still has a good number of Colossus. He's just banking on the Templar count right now, as Fantasy is working on his Ghost count after seeing the Storms from his opponent.
Indeed, he is going to get those into his army here. Fantasy and Terminator are both very even on supplies here. Generally, the Terran player will max out before the Protoss, but in this certain scenario, you know, we did see Terminator pick off a lot of units here and there over the course of the game here. The Zealot run by, going to try to do a little bit of damage here, but Fantasy completely prepared. He's got units in position to defend. Will lose a Marauder and a couple of Marines here, but the Zealots will not do any economic damage.
Terminator sees that his opponent is lacking the critical number of ghosts, and he's just slowly pushing out on the map with the Colossus that he has. His opponent Fantasy does scan the positioning of Terminator. Is this going to halt him, or is he still going to press forward for the attack?
Well, regardless, Fantasy needs the fight in a very wide open area so he can do proper splits here. He doesn't want to be pushed back against the wall. The Ghosts now moving into the front here, going to try to pick off. Oh, the High Templar, though, gets good feedbacks, and 2 Ghosts end up dying here. There's still a lot in the main army for Terminator.
And as few of the Templars are just pressing forward, trying to see if they can get additional feedbacks or Storms in the main army, but Fantasy also having a nice bio control.
All right, it looks like Fantasy wants to press forward now. The Storms, where are they? Okay, 1 more goes down. Looks like they're hiding underneath those Colossi there. There's still 7 in total for Terminator, but I think a few are spread around the map. And yeah, he's got some in the back corner there, just sitting around waiting, just waiting for Fantasy to try to come and drop him or harass him from multiple locations. He's not having any of that.
And this is actually perfect because remember, some players, they try to club up the Templars and 1 EMP takes out all the High Templars. Terminator is making sure that he's going to have some Storms against his opponent, even if some of the main Templars get taken out.
That Storm dishes out a lot of damage there to Fantasy's army. He does have the Medivacs to eventually heal those all up here. But the problem is Terminator, he's been on the offensive now for a while. And Fantasy, he has to play this perfectly. Good snipes go down. Where are the Templar now for the main army of this Protoss player? The Vikings moving in from the side there. It's a good amount of Vikings. The Stalkers trying to focus fire down on these units. Storms coming in. from the bottom right-hand side as well. But Fantasy's control excellent here as he gets rid of the Templars and the Colossi here. One low on health. The 3 Vikings here, they are going to be able to go ahead and snipe it.
Yeah, Terminator decides to go for the attack from the front and Templar from underneath, but the problem is those two did not connect very well. He does have Spear High Templars in the back, but those are getting sniped one by one.
Wow, fantastic control from Fantasy as he just slowly dismantles this Protoss army. Terminator without the Storm, without the Colossus, no, not even any Immortals here to defend. He can actually attack this army head on and defend here. He's reinforcing with more units as well, but the Zealot count still pretty solid. Fantasy needs to respect that here, but with the additional reinforcements coming in, he has enough units to deal with this Protoss army.
And remember, the Protoss player only has 1 Colossus, only has 1 High Templar. His opponent is still getting the Vikings out. This 4th base is toast, as there's no way that Terminator can save it in time unless Fantasy does not focus fire on the Nexus.
This is actually a lot of units here from Terminator. The Stalker count pretty solid here, and the Vikings, are they going to be able to get the Colossus low on health? No, it indeed survives. And Terminator, he defends, and now somehow he's ahead in supply.
Fantasy did not micro the bio units at all. He could have gone for the Nexus if he wanted to. And he saw the Zealots warping in from the bottom, so if he tried to time this correctly, he could have tried to go for the Nexus, lift up the bio units into the medevacs, and boost out of there, but it seems like there was no micro happening in that particular area.
Oh, looks like Fantasy's 3-3 upgrades are going to complete very soon here, and with that, he can once again fight this army pretty easily here. And High Templars coming in, going to try the deal. Nice feedbacks go off on the medevacs here, and yeah, a lot of those units are just going to end up dying here pretty much for free. Fantasy barely escaping with a very red medevac full of units.
I'm still a little bit surprised that Fantasy did not go for the 4th base over there. If he crippled the economy from his opponent, he could have won the game easily. But because of this, he allowed his opponent Terminator to stay inside the game. And if you look at the supply between the 2 players, 170 from our Protoss player against Terminator, while Fantasy is only sitting on 135.
Yeah, all it's going to take is one solid engagement here. Oh no, Fantasy losing his red medevac as well, and that single lone Marine is going to get picked off as well here. It's just looking worse and worse for Fantasy here. He doesn't have a lot of resources in the bank. The extra gas is useless, and oh no, the SCV is moving to the 4th expansion. They're getting picked off instantly. This is just looking worse and worse. And now forced to lift off that 4th command center as well. May end up actually dying to the Stalkers and Archons as well. It's overall Terminator. He's got cannons, Stalkers everywhere. The drop defense from Terminator has been pretty good overall throughout the entire game.
Yeah, and the drops can do a little damage inside the main base, but how can he defend against the number of Zealots and the Archons in the main army of Terminator?
That's the problem. I don't think he actually can in this position. Terminator, I mean, I think he can actually just attack in here. He should be able to win the fight as long as his micro is decent here. Fantasy's position solid. Storm goes down, hits a lot of those units and the Vikings there. More excellent Storms. It looks like Terminator took a lesson from partying and has been placing High Templar everywhere across the map here, and these ghosts simply have not been able to cut it.
Yeah, well, Terminator is finding some room to see if he can engage in his opponent's base, but remember, he doesn't want to screw this up just because of one wrong engagement, especially since he doesn't have a +3 upgrades, while his opponent Fantasy is sitting on +3/+3.
Alright, well, the +3 attack now starting for Terminator. He does scout that the command center did indeed land here at the 4th base once again, and the Mule's gonna slowly get picked off by that single Zealot here, but I think Terminator doesn't even care about that base. It looks like he wants to go for one final big engagement and end the game before Fantasy can muster up enough resources to come back.
Yeah, he just wants to make sure he gets enough units out before he botches an attack and allows his opponent Fantasy to come back into the game. The blink is almost finished as those Stalkers in the front are just going to harass his opponent here. So a little bit nice Storm goes down on some of the bio units.
Unfortunately, the Storm cannot damage the missile turret there because it lands pretty much square in the middle there. And Fantasy trying the research. Cloak now getting 4 more Ghosts. Maybe that could be a saving grace here if you can get proper EMPs off and scare this Protoss army away. The big issue, though, is there's now Archons as well as Storm and Colossus added into the mix. The overall composition from Terminator extremely hard for the Terran players to deal with in this situation without an excellent economy to back them up.
And with Terminator sitting on 200 supply, he should press on for the attack, and even if he loses a few units, as long as he trades efficiently against his opponent, he's going to be far ahead in the game, especially since Fantasy He even lifted up the Fort Command Center at the 5 o'clock position.
Fantasy is ready for this attack here. He's in a very defensible position as well. The thing is, Terminator, he just really is a little bit too afraid, I think, to engage here. He doesn't want to commit.
I don't think he knows how far ahead he is in this game. If he knew that, like you said, he was going to go for the attack and win the game, but because he doesn't exactly know about the situation, hold on. Fantasy is gearing on for the attack.
All right, he's going the engagement. Excellent for Fantasy here, but the problem is, does he have enough to defend? Actually, things are looking decent from him. The problem is the reinforcements may be a little bit too much for our SK Telecom tearing the handle here. The Vikings landing on the ground now. There's no Storm left. Wait, no Storm reinforcing from the back here. Those High Templars could make the big difference here. Storm's now going down on Fantasy's main army here, and he is just simply running out of supply here. 70 to 113 though. Fantasy, he had an amazing engagement here, but the economy is not there. GG is called, and Kespa Team 8 takes their last match in Pro League 4-1.
With Terminator being really careful, you know, he was being a little bit too careful in the middle of the game, but the solid engagements and also going for the constant harassment at the Fort base won him the game as Fantasy was dried up in economy. Yes, SK Telecom T1 is still going to the playoffs, but they need to work a lot. They need to practice a lot harder if they want to crush their opponent this upcoming weekend.
So I'm sure SK Telecom will have a lot to think about as they contemplate their loss here against Kespa Team 8, but overall we did see some pretty cool builds from Team 8, and we did see solid play from their players as well today.
SK Telecom T1, Bisu won the first game as they had a good start. However, S2, Parting, Rain, and Fantasy all fell to players like Cure Argo, Pig Baby, and Terminator.
Yeah, they did, so you know, that does actually, you know, leave me worrying about this team, SK Telecom. They just lost to the last place team in Pro League, Kespa Team 8. You know, obviously, Kespa Team 8, they haven't been doing amazing recently. And, you know, since they were able to defeat SK Telecom T1, just, you know, looking a little bit shaky for them. So here are the results. Kespa Team 8 goes 4-1 versus SK Telecom T1. In the first match, Bisu takes the first and only victory for his team against True, who retired after the match.